Hello everybody, SlimKirby here, and I'm going on a long journey of trying to complete every single Game Boy Advance game in North America. This is the story of the highs, the lows, and all the silly stuff in between for the Game Boy Advance completion experience. This is GB Ace. Game number 2, Monsters Inc. Well, that didn't take long. We already got a licensed animated movie game in the form of Monsters Inc., based on the 2001 Disney and Pixar film of the same name, released on October 26, 2001, developed by Natsume and published by THQ. Monsters Inc. is a very popular animated film by Pixar, and I'm sure a large number of people have seen it before a number of times. Me, however, I've only seen it once or twice, and this would have been a long time ago, much closer to when it first came out. I do remember thinking it was a good movie, though, and I even remember singing and dancing to the end credits song with my junior high swing choir group one year. That's about all of my experience with this movie franchise, though. And no, I have not seen Monsters University either. I should also mention that since I personally picked Super Mario Advance as my first game, this was technically the first game we drew for the challenge, so out of 944 games, this was the game that showed up first. How interesting. Getting into the game, there's really not a whole lot to say or talk about though, as it's actually a pretty bare-bones game, all things considered. The main menu only has the option to start the game and put a password and an options menu, which is really just your sound and music options. So it looks like this game completion requirement this time will just be as simple as beating the game. We even get a difficulty selection between easy, normal, and hard. When a game offers this choice, I'm only going to be sticking with the default difficulty option, the one that's initially highlighted, so I stuck with normal for this playthrough. If I find out later or after the fact that you get something additional, or if you have a true ending for beating it on a higher difficulty level, I may go back through and play it again, but please understand that it will only be on a case-by-case basis that I do that. I'm not here to master these games, just beat the games and draw the ending and credits. Now, I'm gonna assume you've already seen this movie, and not really elaborate on the plot too much in this summary. But honestly, that's okay, because the game honestly doesn't really focus on it much either. You get some images from the movie, and no real text really describing what's going on, so it's kind of obvious that they didn't really care about giving a synopsis of the world and how we got to this point. Heck, I feel like they skipped like half the movie to begin with, as Sully and Mike, the two main protagonists, are already watching a young girl whom they named Boo, and are trying to keep her out of harm's way from the other monsters. They do kind of get into some familiar settings towards the end of the game, but I'll talk about that more when we actually get to that point. Anyway, the basic objective going on here is that Boo's bedroom door, basically a makeshift portal from this monster world to the human realm, is being destroyed, and the pieces of her door are sent into other worlds that Sully has to venture into and collect so they can repair the door and take Boo home. Each phase, or world of the game, is broken up into a couple of levels, each one with a couple of door pieces, and once you obtain them, all for that world, you put the door together, fight the boss of that world, and then move on to the next one, in a basic game progression manner. What genre would I define this game? Well, I wouldn't exactly call this a platformer. It kind of plays like one, I guess, but it's more of a 2.5D action-adventure game with some very slight platforming elements, although if anything, I'd equate it more to a trick house type of game, where each level is a randomized setup of items, enemies, and obstacles, and you must navigate through and collect all the items you need to beat the level. Try to think of each level as a very simple Zelda dungeon that you've never experienced before. You have to explore the layout and maze of rooms to find everything you need to beat the dungeon, and that's basically what this is. Honestly, the setup itself for this is actually pretty cool. Just the fact that each time you enter the level and everything is randomized means you can technically have a different type of experience each time you play this game. And honestly, I'm all about that, as seen through my love of various video game randomizers. You could also almost see it as a very primitive version of a roguelike genre too. Although, trust me on this, when I say primitive, I mean primitive. More on that later. You control Sully for this game, and unfortunately, it's only Sully. Don't get me wrong, I like Sully as a character, and it's pretty cool tearing through these levels as the big guy, but I think it would have been cool to at least have an option to play as Mike as well. In fact, I was actually convinced you could play as Mike at one point after doing some slight research for this game, and it mentioned that you could, but apparently that was for the Game Boy Color version of the game, or just another version of the game in general. I found it weird that you couldn't do that in this version, and even tried pressing all the buttons on different screens of the game, but no, I'm pretty sure it's only Sully's adventure this time. Anyway, in addition to moving, running, and jumping, Sully can also perform 2 attacking options. If you press the R button, you can perform a roaring shockwave attack, which can temporarily push back some enemies, assuming you have the candy to perform this attack, and if you press L, you have an attack that pretty much gets treated as a screen nuke, where you're not only stun some of the enemies, but also just flat out remove some obstacles and impediments in your way. Much like the other attack, you only have limited uses of this maneuver, and they are signified by what I call cans of tuna in the top left, meaning you can only have 3 uses of this at a time, while the candy is way more plentiful and you can collect up to 100 pieces of it to get an extra life as well. Like I said before, each level is broken up into basically a maze, or network of rooms, and if you press the select button, you can actually take a look at the map for each area, and see what rooms have items, doors to other rooms, or even ladders to different sub-levels for even more rooms. When you enter a room with an item, you can actually look at the map and see what items are there to determine if you want to collect them or not. These items can be the pieces of Boo's door, which again, you are trying to collect, as well as health refills if you get damaged, or even candy or tuna can pickups to restock your special attacks. Once you collect all the pieces of Boo's door, you get taken out of the level immediately, and then move on to the next one, where you pretty much start the process all over again. Along the way, you can also find some special items as well, including Boo's doll, which I guess is actually Mike's doll if you watch the movie, but it's only for Boo in this game. If you find the doll in each level, you can get a nice little bonus from Boo after the level ends, where she can restock some of your consumables. And sometimes you can find a portal that will take you to a skiing minigame. There's only one of these per world, but again, if you find it, you can get a lot of extra candy, so it may be worth your time. Plus, it's a pleasant change of pace from the standard form of gameplay. Also, and perhaps the biggest surprise for me personally, after you beat a level and you start putting the pieces of Boo's door together, well, let's just say the gameplay felt very inspired by another game I truly love.
Oh my god! They're not doing... Oh my god, they're actually doing this. Oh my god, guys. Pieces Game of the Year.
Seriously, of all the games I wound up picking first, what are the chances that the first one would have a jigsaw element to it? Don't get too used to it though, this is literally the full extent of this type of gameplay, just an end-of-stage minigame. After beating all the levels of the world and after putting Boo's door together, you then end up in a room and in a boss fight, and the boss of the first world is against Randall, the main antagonist of the movie. He's really not that hard to beat, as he just kind of walks around and changes lanes, and all you have to do is just fire some shots at him until he goes down. It's really pretty simple. You can also use your screen nuke attack as well to do a little extra damage, especially if he starts getting a little more evasive, but it never hurts to keep some ammo for later as well, even if it is painfully easy to restock over time. And once you beat World 1, you move on to World 2 and do the same thing all over again. And it pretty much stays that way for the rest of the game. And I'm not joking either, there is really not much of a difference for each of the worlds. The backdrops change a little, and some stages get some additional obstacles and things to look out for, but even in the final world, the general gameplay and enemies you deal with are all practically the same. The variations honestly don't change much at all, and it's really quite a shame, because the game does get really repetitive after a while. World 2 has some levels where you move on the rooftops of buildings or on the streets below, which is a nice change of scenery, but whenever you enter a door or climb down a ladder in the background, you end up inside of a house that pretty much looks like World 1 again. And then when you get to World 3, a majority of the levels are street levels again. So like, why all the repetition here? At least the streets have more obstacles now, like rolling barrels and enemies popping out of trash cans, but still, it feels just like another rerun of what we did previously, with just very little added in between. There was a really neat sushi restaurant level in World 3 as well though, and this was probably the most unique and fun level in the game, just because, well, it's the only time we see this backdrop, and was radically different from everything else we've seen in this game so far. Oh, and before I forget to mention, World 1 had 3 levels and a boss, while both Worlds 2 and 3 had 4 levels and the boss. And after seeing this, I got significantly worried that each sequential world could potentially expand the level number even more, as the level's select screen did seem pretty big considering. Thankfully though, my fears were a little eased when I saw that World 4 was actually only 2 levels, and although World 5, the final world, did extend itself to 5, it at least made sense as the final world of the game. So the sense of overloading tedium did decrease after a while, thank God. Oh, and as for the bosses, I didn't remember if any of these were in the movie or not, or at least the bosses of World 2 and 3 anyway, but you face off against an orange monster in World 2, who just kind of rapid-fire shoots at you, forcing you to wait for an opening to get him back, and a blue monster in World 3 who can make giant spikes rain from the sky, but again, leaves himself open to attacks pretty easily. They weren't as easy as Randall was, but still, I wouldn't say they were hard either. Plus, Boo can actually give you health pickups in these fights after a while as well, so you can always just stall and wait for them to appear. Getting back to World 4, like I said before, it's only 2 levels and then the boss, and this time both levels take shape in the form of a giant bathroom maze, or locker room of sorts, which again, it's a new setting, so not entirely a bad thing. And the boss this time is actually a familiar face in the form of Waternoose, who I do remember quite well from the movie. Funnily enough, he's about as easy as Randall was. All you have to do is just wait for him to send off some tentacles, jump over them, and fire when he makes himself vulnerable on the side of the screen. That's really about it. Another quick and brainless fight. In World 5, the game does actually try to get some plot going on, though, as Boo gets kidnapped by Randall, who, yes, does come back despite us kicking his monster butt back in World 1, and to make things difficult for Sully, Randall leads him into a giant mess and maze of doors, kind of mimicking the final climax of the movie when they are climbing on and around the doors in the door factory. This was a pretty neat finale, by the way. I still wouldn't say it was amazing by any stretch, it's still largely the same gameplay we've been doing this whole time, but at least it seemed like the difficulty was ramped up a little bit, but not in an unfair and chaotic way either. It's not like you'll have to deal with instant death pits or anything like that, just more obstacles to dodge and things doing a bit more damage to you, that's all. After taking care of this world, you do battle with Randall once again, this time while he sends numerous waves of goons at you. But once you get him down, you take him out for good, and pretty much conclude the story and finish the game, getting Boo back to her own world and ending all of this chaos once and for all. Game complete.
Boo! Ah, no text. Okay, well, there we go.
Well, that was most certainly a video game. And again, I do think there is and was some potential here. The fact that each level is randomized for each individual level playthrough is a really, really cool concept that, if anything, felt quite ahead of its time. It's just the level theme variety and the variety of enemies and enemy variations felt quite lacking, to say the least. In fact, 90% of the enemies in this game are just the yellow hazmat suit guys, whom appear in the first level and continue to be the main foes until the very end of the game, including in the final boss fight. So this game really suffers from a severe case of repetition. The game was at least playable though, and once you get a feel for the controls and general movement, you'd be surprised at how fast you can really get things moving. As for the general visual and sound presentation, the game itself honestly doesn't look too bad, and this was a very early GBA title as well. Some of the visuals do look kinda silly though, especially Sully when he's facing downwards, It looks like he's even wondering why the hell he's in this game in the first place. The music didn't really leave much of an impression on me, though. It seemed pretty standard and generic, and most of it repeated across several parts of the game anyway, so I really wasn't that thrilled with it. Before I stopped playing this, though, I did check out Hard Mode, just to see what it was like and see what changes across the different difficulties. Hard actually gives you limited map visibility, so you can only see what's in the room you're currently in, and other rooms you've ventured in, meaning you'll likely have to do way more exploring and mapping out in this mode, adding more tedium as opposed to a challenge. I'm not sure and couldn't really tell if anything else changed though, as far as enemy behaviors and stats, or if the maps themselves got bigger or longer. It didn't seem like there were any extra unlockables either, so I decided to leave it at that and move on from there. But yeah, that was Monsters Inc., the first of what will be likely tons of licensed video games we'll be playing for this challenge. At least it wasn't a total stinker, but it could have definitely offered a bit more. I gave it a 2.5 out of 5 for enjoyability, just because I do think it has some good ideas at least, but could have definitely been way more engaging. And for difficulty, I gave it a 1 out of 5. The game wasn't free by any means, but I think I only died once in the entire course of this playthrough, and the game gives plenty of resources to utilize throughout, so you should never be in any real danger of your game coming to an end. Plus, the game gives you plenty of passwords to use throughout in an effort to try and continue your run, so it's really not hard to get through, assuming it keeps your attention for long enough. Anyway, that's about it, so here's a sneak peek of the next game we'll be playing for this challenge. Okay guys, thank you for watching this summary, I really appreciate it. Don't forget to leave a comment and or like on the video, as those will really help me in these videos out. And stay tuned for future summaries of this series. If you also want to watch full playthroughs of these games for this challenge, check out the video description for a full playlist of everything that's been uploaded and exported so far. And if you're curious about what I'm playing right now for the challenge, be sure to stop by my Twitch channel to see what my current progress is. Just be warned, I'll be a lot further ahead of where we are for these summaries, so keep that in mind. This has been SlimKirby in the GBA series, and I'll talk to you fine people next time. Later, folks.